What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. With Surging Sparks pre-release just around the corner at the time of filming, it'll be here this weekend, so 4 days from now. Wanted to go over the new set, kind of walk through all the cards with you. I think there are some cards in here that aren't really being talked about a lot, but that I believe will really shake up the TCG scene as it is right now. Where we had Stellar Crown, Scalar Crown brought some cards with it that shook things up a bit. I mean, we're seeing Terapagos get a lot of play. Area Zero got included in a lot of decks, and Hoot Hoot was a really nice acceleration card, just for going through the deck. I think this one actually has more potential in different cards for shaking things up. Um, without further ado, let's get right into it. We're just going to go down this card list and kind of go over some of the things I think will be impactful and how I see them being played. Um, Big shout out to Justin Basil. This is a great resource for all upcoming sets and even just people trying to get into it, how to play, what's going on, rotations, things like that. But without further ado, let's start going down this list. I will say they've added some grass type cards that may or may not do anything. I think for the most part the grass selection here was a little weak. Durant EX being able to discard one card at the time of playing doesn't really do much. I could see Vengeful Crush being good against something like a Charizard or a Roaring Moon, things like that, but I already feel like they're getting less play, so this probably won't see any play, um, at least in my opinion. The only other call out is this Shiinotic being able to make the active Pokemon asleep in a meta that where status conditions really mattered. This would probably matter more, but in this meta, not so sure that it's going to do much. So don't really see a huge change coming from the grass side here. We got a little bit of acceleration coming from the Pavilion, but it's a stage 2, so it already takes so much to get there that it's probably too late. Where we start getting interesting, really just starts. I feel like almost every single other energy type has something interesting in it. Um, we've got the Victini is basically a baby Zapdos with a little bit of extra fire damage. Probably won't see that much. It's only 10 damage. Where we get really interesting is the Ceruledge additions. Um, Not quite sure how this is going to play out here in the U.S., but it's seeing some play in Japan. 280 for 3 different energy, where you discard all energy from this Pokemon. However, his 1 fire energy attack does 20 more damage for each energy in the discard pile. So really, you can use Raging Amethyst to start flooding energy into the discard pile, as well as other cards like Ultra Balls and things like that. Um, what I do think may be tricky with this card is getting the 3 different types of energy on him. And I think that's one of the problems with the Stellar Terra cards is they require 3 different types of energy, and it's very difficult to do an energy acceleration that way, right? Even with Crispin, for example, you can get one on, and then you can search for a different one. At most, you're getting 2 of those energies in a turn. If you don't top deck or have another way to draw into the third type of energy, well, you can't play your attack. And at only 270 HP, if you have to wait more than 2 turns to use this attack, you're probably going to get killed by things like Raging Bolt or a Charizard, or even a Lugia at that point should be set up by turn 3 or 4 to be able to knock it out. So it'll be interesting to see what cards and what methods people come up with to accelerate these energies on. If we can come up with a consistent format to do energy acceleration, then these cards will really take off. I have a feeling Pokemon Company probably has something brewing, or they wouldn't be releasing all of these. I mean, they started with Crispin, but there's probably more to come. Being a stage 1, it's not very difficult to get out. 270 HP is decent, but really you're looking at, I think this Abyssal Flames for 1 fire energy will be really powerful late game if you can get a good amount of energy discarded. Not only that, 280 is a huge attack. So that one I'm really excited for. I think that might shake some things up. This Sortilege is also interesting just because it has an attack that discards all special energy from all of your opponent's Pokemon. That is insanely powerful. For anybody that plays, a Snorlax with a Giacomo into Lugia, you're trying to move the energies around to get a nice discard off. This just straight away discards all of the special energy. So into a deck like Lugia, Terapagos, even Iron Thorns, this would actually be pretty strong. So this might be a tech that you see as an option, maybe one card in the Ceruledge decks. This Scovillain doesn't really add as much as the other one did. I think the one that discards cards was a little bit more interesting. Uh, this doesn't really, I don't think we'll see much play. Gouging Fire, it's kind of the same. I think in regular format it'll be a little weak. I do think in pre-release format, where every single person has 4 or fewer prize cards, doing 170 will be really useful for knocking out most of the cards in pre-release. Does require 3 energy, and outside of pre-release format, 170 doesn't do too much for you. So that's really it with the fire. Fire type, I do think, we will see play with Ceruledge. People love that Pokemon, so they'll make some decks around it. For the most part, I think that'll change some things up. Water type has some interesting options that came out here. The first one we're going to talk about is Milotic Stage 1. The ability to prevent all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon. Given the mass amount of Terra Pokemon coming out, like Ceruledge and Terapagos and a lot of others that you'll see later on in the set, this is basically a Mimikyu on steroids for the upcoming format. Little harder to get into the active and a little more niche than a Mimikyu would be, but it does do 160 damage with the added bonus of putting the opponent's Pokemon to sleep. So not quite sure how much this will hit into decks, but I do think that we will at least see some people try to make this viable. It really depends on how much the Terra Pokemon take over the meta coming up. But I do think they added this as a way to counter everyone just playing a Terra deck. So that's interesting. We've got the Black Kyurem. I'm not quite sure this does much. 250 damage for 4 energy is kind of weak. 230 HP is kind of weak. And having an added bonus against a dragon type Pokemon is a little weak. I mean, maybe into Raging Bolt is helpful, but this thing would get knocked out very quickly. So not sure that's going to do much there. But one other interesting card, an interesting addition that I think is being a little overlooked is the Chen Pao. Being able to discard a stadium just from play. In previous metas, we saw cards like this being played that were even weaker, that had about 60 HP. This one has 120 and, has not a terrible attack. This is going to be another one of those where it may see play. I don't feel like the meta is very stadium heavy, but having one of these could let you win a stadium war if you have a matchup that it's important into, for example. So this one, look out for this one. We might see some play if there's a deck that requires a stadium to be out. Where we start to get really interesting here, I think the electric section has quite a bit to offer. Everyone's already talking about Pikachu. The ability, if this Pokemon has full HP, would be knocked out by a damage from attack. It is not knocked out, but its remaining HP is 10. So anything that does, if it's full HP, anything that does 200 or more damage, this stays alive. Now, Pikachu is a really strong attacker with 300 here. Things like Defiance Band and some other cards can easily knock out pretty much any card in the format. Having only 200 HP makes Resolute Heart easy to activate against big hitters. It'll also force a counterplay out of the opponent where they can't knock it out in one turn. It takes 2 turns. You may be able to get 2 attacks off where you take 4 prize cards for their 2. Or you may be even able to do something fancy where you penny it up. It's a basic. You fully heal everything off and you can put it back on the bench. If you get 2 of them going, you might be able to do some penny loops and make it impossible to knock them out. So I think this is a really powerful Pokemon. I think the discard 3 energy is going to be interesting to play around. We were given Hourglass in the last release. Let's pull up, see if we can pull this up. Power Glass. There we go. At the end of your turn, if it's basically you attach it to Pikachu. At the end of the turn, you can get a basic energy back onto it from your discard pile. So this is really strong. If it's in the active spot, it's kind of Not as interesting, but maybe if you have two of them out, you can switch them both around with the penny, put it into the active spot, get the power glass back onto it, and now you're going to immediately have an energy, that in one Crispin, and now it's powered up immediately in one turn from 0 energy. So I think this one will definitely see play. I think people will try to build decks around it. I also think that the Miraidon deck is going to could change to utilize Pikachu instead of the Mewtwo, because at least this one provides some value to it. It would be weird to add the other energies, but who knows what will happen with that. And that said, this set added another really interesting card here to get energies from the discard pile in Magneton. So this is almost like a Dusknoir, where when you use the ability, it's knocked out. However, it doesn't do damage. It attaches up to 3 basic energy cards to any lightning Pokemon in any way that you like. So it's important to note that it doesn't say lightning energy, it just says lightning Pokemon. So you can get all 3 of your energy with knocking out, one Magneton, they take 1 prize, you get another 300 attack, which would likely give you another 2 prize knockout. So for 1 prize, you could take 2, which is very similar to like the Dusknoir mechanics that we're seeing. I think this will be used a lot in conjunction with Pikachu. These two have been talked about a good bit, so I'm not going to talk about them too much more. You'll see them in some other videos. But another card that I think is really interesting that I haven't seen many people talk about is actually this Rotom. So the attack is fine, but what is actually most interesting to me is the Crushing Pulse. So your opponent reveals their hand, discard all item cards and tool cards you find there. Now, for most decks, this probably doesn't matter too much. However, for things like Control, 1 energy on a single prizer to discard every single item card and tool card in a hand, it can be really, really powerful. So if you look at things like Pidgeot Control now, they run this Luxray for 2 energy, discard a trainer card from the opponent's hand. This has an added benefit of being able to discard supporters, whereas the Rotom doesn't. However, this is 2 energy or a double colorless. And it's a 2 prize knockout liability. And it only discards 1 card. So I definitely think this will make its way into some control decks. Maybe it's too niche of a card, but I think that it's really powerful. I mean, if you look at as a tech into Charizard matchups, for example, being able to discard their rare candies or anything like that, Defiance fans even in the beginning, really powerful. So I think this one is not talked about, but you could see it get played some. That's pretty much it for the electric offerings. I mean, I think that they definitely packed this with Pikachu being the lead on the box and the Magneton being the promo. I mean, they knew what they were doing. These 2 cards are powerful. They want them to see some play. The other things in here I think are a little weak. Switch Pokemon on your bench, attach 2 cards from your hand. Could be nice, but it's a stage 2 and it has to be in the active. And I don't know, it seems like it's a little slow to power up. It only does 40 per energy. Same with the Miraidon. It's an interesting ad. Prevent all damage done to your future Pokemon. This could see some play in future decks just for protecting in really niche scenarios, but I don't think we'll see it as much because it's just a very specific use card. And it doesn't work when it's not in the active. So if they have a boss to bump anyways, they're not going to want to kill this in the active. They're going to want to go after something else. It's a 2 prizer. So I don't think that really will do its job either. Then we get into the psychic offerings, and there's one that really stands out above the rest, but we'll get into that. There's a couple of other ones that are interesting. I think that this Togekiss is interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to see any consistent use, but if you knock your opponent's active Pokemon out, you can flip a coin and take another prize card if it lands heads. As a stage 2, it's really hard to get to that, and it really probably isn't worth investing everything into a coin flip. But anytime you can take an extra prize card, those cards find their way into the format. So look at Iron Hands, for example. That's being played a lot. Just able to take an extra prize card is huge for some matchups. This Azumarill is actually interesting too because you can do a 230 for 1 Psychic if you have Terra Pokemon. This could see some niche play as well. It is a stage 2, so it's not quite as good, right? You're gonna have to run extra cards and to even make this work. So okay, let's really talk about the big hitters here because there's a few of them. The first one that's going to see a lot of play, just guaranteed, is this Latios. Basic Pokemon in play have no retreat cost. There are a ton of decks that just only run basic Pokemon. This card might be, level on the level of Pheasantipity or close to it, where Pheasantipity works for every deck. This one only really works if it's just basic. But there's just so much utility here to having no retreat cost. Look at a Raging Bolt deck, look at a Terapagos deck. In a lot of decks that are coming out here with like the Pikachu, for example, that's a basic Pokemon. You can retreat into a different Pikachu that is full health and triggers its ability again. I think this is going to see a lot of play. Not sure it's going to be ever used for its regular attack. It probably is going to just be a bench sitter. Which brings up an interesting point because I think that given the increase in psychic type Pokemon, there may be some other psychic decks which, or decks that run at least a psychic energy, which opens the door for Enamorous V to shine again. This card, if any of your Pokemon have a psychic energy attached, it prevents effects of abilities, right? Now, why is this good? Well, it's good because Dusknoir is rampant in the format. So it would prevent damage from Dusknoir onto things like a Latios, onto things like a Pikachu, for example, onto any of the things that you don't want to get KO'd easily. It'll just help that extra. So I do think we might see this card come back around a little bit. I think that's really a niche offering, but it's possible with all these psychic types coming out. People talk about Latios. There's no surprise that that's an interesting one. The one that I'm very excited to see if it does anything that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is actually the Sylveon. I'll show you in a second the Eevee, why the Eevee is also very powerful. But long story short, actually, we'll go over that one now. So Eevee's a new normal type here. Where are you, Eevee? If you look at this, as long as it's Pokemon in the active spot, it can evolve during your first turn or the turn you play it. That is huge. You can, effectively, if you open with this Eevee, you can have this Sylveon EX on turn 1. Can't use its ability turn 1, but you can get these things into play really quickly. Just by having this Eevee into the active spot. It also gives you a lot of nice tech where you can bench a lot of these Eevees, and the opponent might have to, if they knock out an Eevee, they're only taking a 1 prize. You can promote another Eevee and immediately get a Sylveon onto it without having to sit that bench liability. So I think this is going to be a really powerful card. Let's go back into the Sylveon and see why does that even matter. Because a lot of the evolutions right now are a little weak. So this Sylveon, though, however, I personally think it's going to be really interesting. One, it's a Terra Pokemon, so it activates all of those other abilities. We'll start with the basic attack, which isn't necessarily the most interesting thing, but it is decent. For Psychic and 2 colorless, you do 160 damage, and attacks used by the defending Pokemon do 100 less damage next turn. So that's good for, it could keep this Pokemon out for a little longer. It only has 270 HP, which isn't the worst. It's not the beefiest, but it's not the worst. But what I think is really interesting, and I think we will definitely see people build some decks around this and figure this out, is the Angelite attack. Choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, shuffle those Pokemon and all cards into your opponent's deck. You can only use this, you can't use this if you use it during your last turn at all, so you can't switch it out and use it again. I think that line right there tells you Pokemon Company knows that this is going to be a really powerful attack. This is for a Water, a Lightning, and a Psychic. So those 3 energies also work for your attack, and this doesn't have to discard. So you only have to get them onto it 1 time, which is good. But where this can be powerful, so let's say you have a boss, you have a counter catcher, you have a regular Pokemon catcher, you have anything that can change the active Pokemon out. If your opponent is a Dragapult or a Charizard, or even if there's anything that's a stage 2, you use Angelite and you put it back in the deck. there may be a situation where they just cannot get it back out, right? If they're running Charizard, they've used a bunch of rare candies, they may not be able to get a Pidgeot back out, right? If they got a candy prize, they use candy Charizard, candy Pidgeot. Uh, you may be able to get in situations where you just completely lock them out of playing what they're trying to do. Same thing with like a Dragapult. If you are able to boss or prime out a target that you don't really care is there, like maybe a Rotom, for example, and you are able to send it back to their deck fully evolved Pidgeot and a fully evolved Dragapult with the Terra Crystal, that's going to set your opponent back so many turns that even the weak attack like Magical Charm doing 160, you might be able to just run through what is left on the bench. I think this is going to be really powerful. I think no one's really talking about it. The energy costs, again, this is something where the energy costs are a little difficult for all of these stellar Pokemon. I think they will likely release cards that help. Things like Power Glass, you can get one on if you run like a discard heavy deck. Crispin is obviously good into these stellar cards. There's a ton of different options there, but this can be a really good coming from behind deck where you don't need to be ahead because you can activate your counter catchers. You set up a Sylveon, you get a turn where your Sylveon comes out, you counter catcher, and you set the board state the way you want it. They may not be able to come back from it for most decks. Into something like Raging Bolt, it's not as powerful because they don't have so much setup. But into something like a Lugia, this could completely cripple, right? If they spend their entire game setting up an Archeops, you put one or both of them back into the deck, and now they have no energy acceleration. I think, let that stew. Think about that. This card will see some play. I'm actually excited to build some decks around it. You could even run weird things like Dusknoir where you're able to knock out, you leave just two cards that are 120 HP out. You're able to knock out one card with Dusknoir and the other card with Sylveon. Now they have a blank board, and you'll get win states like that. I guarantee it with this card where they just run out of Pokemon. So I'm really excited for this one. Honestly, was one of the main reasons I wanted to make the video, is just to talk about it. I think that some of the other ones in here aren't as important. In a format where special conditions aren't that important, this card doesn't really matter. In a format where special conditions are really important, this card would be a nice addition. The Palisand, I don't think we're going to see, the Barite Jail looks cool, putting damage counters on until their HP is 100 on every single bench Pokemon. That's great and all, but maybe in combination in the next turn you can double Dusknoir and kill two things, but it's just such a long setup card with a very high energy cost and not really good options for energy acceleration, and not a high enough health to be able to do the setup. So I think that's it for the Psychic side. I do think it's interesting they added one Gimmighoul here. I think they're trying to buff those decks that have been making their rounds, the Goldango decks. Search two, this is search for two basic energy, reveal them, put them in your hand. That's really good for Goldango's abilities, where I'll show you where he does damage based on the energies in hand. Let's do one where you can read it a little. Discard any number of energies from your hand, attack does 50 more. So they added this to strengthen that deck, I believe, which is, I think, a cool addition. It's a cool deck that needs a little bit of love. But let's go into fighting types. I actually think the fighting type is very unloved right now in the TCG and would be really strong if there's a deck that was built around it that was good. That said, I'm not sure any of these cards add that. Flygon being, I think a really cool Pokemon, doesn't seem to do much. Doing 100 damage to each EX and V is cool. Not affected by weakness or resistance, also cool. But 100 damage into all these cards with 270, 310, you're going to take 3 turns to kill them with that attack. This card will likely be gone by then into most matchups. And it also removes your weakness or resistance bonus that you're going to get with fighting into a lot of things. So Uh, it's a little unfortunate because I think this could have been a cool card if they had given a little bit more love. What else are we? There wasn't much else here in fighting. Not only that, it's a stage two. Stage twos don't seem to get a ton of love. This is an interesting ability. All stage two benched Pokemon have no abilities. I don't even know what this is trying to target. Maybe Charizard evolving from the bench. Uh, there's not a ton of stage two Pokemon with abilities. I mean, the Lugia deck, Archeops, this just cripples it. But that you still again it's a stage one, so you need to put space for it. If you have a fighting deck and you're struggling into Lugia, this would be a great addition that ruin their energy acceleration, but it's not hard for them to take it out, and it's hard for you to get it up. So I'm not sure it's going to see much. I would like to see Flygon played, but it'll be very interesting to see how that could even work. Um, the now dark. They didn't add a ton of cards here, but they did add something that is very exciting. The Hydreigon line. Um, every single one of these cards lets you discard a card from the opponent's deck. So if you have this out and you have a dark energy, immediately you can start discarding cards. Even the stage one discards 2 cards, but the big kahuna there is Hydreigon EX, huge HP, 330, up there with was the highest in the format, but we have one more that we'll talk about a little later that's a little higher. Um, I think everybody is focused on this Obsidian attack, but the Crashing Headbutt's also interesting. But let's talk about Obsidian first. So for a Psychic, a Dark, a Steel, and a Colorless, you do 130 to the active, and you do 130 to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This is kind of like a Kyurem on steroids. Um, the difference here, and what I think people are missing with this card, is if you have this set up and you're unable to get all 4 energy, because this is a big ask, right? And this is part of the downfall with this card, is it requires 4 energy. This Crashing Headbutt is not a bad attack at all, and I think people are missing the ability here to 200 is a decent damage. I mean, you're looking at Charizard as an example. They're going to be 180 or 210 in the beginning. So 200 is right up there. But discarding top 3 cards, uh, I mean, there's entire decks that are built around milling, right? And milling specific cards can be really powerful. This one mills and does 200 damage, and there's nothing in the format that does that. So I think this attack in and of itself could be the only thing people use, and they build milling decks based around it. I think people are missing that. I think that the Obsidian is a nice game closing ability that can be put in conjunction with Dusknoir as well. I mean, Dusknoir is in every deck, but there's Psychic here. It's possible there's some conjunction to make Obsidian work. I do think this is a deck that will, when things are built around it, it's going to be a come from behind sort of deck where you're doing your best to get rid of the opponent's resources. You might be down in prizes, but then you're trying to get the board into a state where you can just dominate. This putting out 390 damage in one turn is got to be it has to be the highest of any card that we know of in the format, 390 in one turn. Really excited to see this one as well. I like the control focus deck, so if somebody builds out this with discarding the top 3, it's a control focus deck. You could really mill through their deck quickly and have a big attacker in the way for not very much energy on that attack. I think people are kind of missing that ability there. Not much else added to the dark line there. We have a lot of steel types added. I mean, this set is just stacked. I think that there is something for everybody here, and it's not really being talked about in that way, but they've added. We'll talk about Goldango first because they're giving some love to this deck. They've added this single prizer where you can do 120 if it evolves in one turn, and you can shuffle all cards back into your deck. This could be interesting for getting something off the board if you don't need it. Probably won't add much to the deck, but at least it gives it another option to look at and use. Now, where we get an interesting card in Steel is actually this Archaludon. Probably said that wrong. Duruludon and Archaludon. Hard to say. The bridge Pokemon. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you can attach 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your steel Pokemon in any way that you like. So this is very similar to a Charizard, but the Charizard pulls the cards from the deck, and this card pulls them from the discard. The difference here is you can put them any way that you like. So also very powerful. The other difference is that this requires 3 energy to do its attack, um, which is a 220, similar to Charizard card, but it's a little different. I think this card will see play. I actually think it might see play in a deck like Gimme Ghoul that focuses around steel. It's possible. There was also a Scizor deck that saw a little bit of play. It wasn't the best, but could see it come around with this card. 220 and removing weakness on the next turn could be really powerful, especially into like if you start playing the Cerule Edge deck where there's a fire weakness. But the energy acceleration is what's big here because you can get Duraludon in one turn, get an energy on it, and next turn you get all the rest of your energies. Really powerful. And it has a nice setup with this card if you're unable to, if for some reason it takes you too many turns and you get this card out, you can discard. There's at least some synergy there. It probably won't stay alive for you to do that, but I do think this is a card to watch out for. Anytime you can evolve and add energy and attack in a turn, it's powerful. Then we go to the dragon side, which is interesting. Um, when I first saw this executor card, I thought it was very interesting. You could, for the main reason that swinging Sphene, you can flip a coin, you knock out your opponent's active basic Pokemon of its head, and if it's tails, you knock out a benched basic Pokemon. So at first, when I first read this, I didn't see the basic, and I said, "Oh wow, that's really strong." Now, the problem with this is it's so matchup dependent, where it's one, it's RNG dependent, and two, it's matchup dependent, where if they're not running basic Pokemon, if you're going against the Lugia, for example, and everything's not basic, that attack does literally nothing. Not only that, you can flip the tails and it does nothing. So you're really erring on the side of that attack doing nothing. So I think it won't be as powerful or used, but you might see it on some niche decks. Um, that said, the basic Pokemon thing is just such a hit to this card where it could have been good, but then they gave it that restriction, and I think it won't see much play. The other attack, you can attach any number of basic energy cards from your hand. That is nice, but again, you need the cards in your hand, and you need 2 energy on this. So could have been great. I think it won't see much play, but it is an interesting card. And they added some Applins and things like that. I think maybe to try to boost up that Hydrapple deck. It's possible they were trying to give it a little bit of options, but I don't think those will see much play. Same with this Tatsugiri. It's kind of a beefed up version of the other Tatsugiri. So this was the other one where you're able to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and get a supporter. The difference is this one looks at the top 10 cards of your deck and grabs Pokemon. So could be interesting. However, the energy requirement for it is ridiculous. By the time you have 3 different energy on this one card and it's in the active, you probably already have your bench set up and you're probably already dead because it only has 160. I'm not sure how this would see any play or use, to be honest. 100 attack is weak, 160 HP is weak, and it's a 2-prizer, and then it requires so much energy. It's kind of unfortunate. Then we get into the normal, which again has some great cards. We went over the EV before. I'm hoping that with that evolution set that's been rumored that we start to see more. But as long as Pokemon is in your active spot, it can evolve during your first turn. I think that's huge. Just gives you a real leg up in getting a board state set up where the opponent can't do anything about it. We'll see what gets added. If there's other evolutions that are good that get added, like that Sylveon, I think this will see a lot of play. I did go over and look at all of the evolutions in standard, and they're not very powerful right now. So we'll see. One other card in here that I think we'll see a lot of play is this Slacking. So as you know, from the game, they're known to only be able to attack every other turn. So they usually add something like that in the TCG, and in this case, you can't attack if they have no EX or V Pokemon in play. Now, does that really matter? Probably not, because almost every deck has an EX or V Pokemon. I mean, your Ancient Box doesn't, and Lost Box can not play. Like sometimes they play it, but they probably won't play it. Other than that, everything else has an EX or V in play. Stall and Control can theoretically not put one out, but Control requires the Pidgeot a lot. So Stall would just have to not have their card draw out. You force the opponent to play in a bad position anyways, and you're going to have other answers to those. So this is a really powerful, and this is where I mean, it is just a very beefy card at 340 HP. It's going to require 2 swings to knock it out from pretty much everything. Raging Bolt and Minccino are probably the only cards that can get there, and even then you are sacrificing a lot just to knock out one card. Not only that, it doesn't have just a good health, it has an insane attack too. 280 for, you do one double colorless, double turbo on this, and you get 260 attack. Insane. I think this card will absolutely see play. I don't see why it would not. I just think it's too strong. I mean, you could literally bench this, or you could put this in the active and take a hit even, and then attack the next turn and knock out the opponent's Pokemon. Again, this is a card that has weakness to fighting. They don't really have good fighting cards in the format. It's a shame. I'm hoping they're going to come out with some because there's just so many decks built around the normal cards right now. And this, I think, will only add to that. It is a stage 2, so you're going to have to run some rare candies. You're going to have to do something to get it out. Like, it's not the easiest card to get out, but it's not. I think it'll really see some use. The other couple of cards we had here, we had a single prize trap goes, which is interesting, where you can search for your deck, get 3 basic energy cards, attach them to Terra Pokemon in any way. Really good energy acceleration. I think this one isn't being talked about either, but the fact that this gets 3 basic energy cards any of different types and attaches them to your Terra Pokemon any way that you like, you can power up a Pikachu in 1 turn with this, and it's only a single prize liability. If you get 2 turns of this and you have your other bench Pokemon, you can set up your whole Stellar Terra board with really powerful attacks. So I think this is a good energy acceleration play that people aren't really talking about. I think the Cyclizar, I don't think this is going to do too much. I don't think this is going to see play at all. Drawing 5 cards for all these different energies is going to be difficult. 30 damage on the bench isn't that great, so don't think that'll see much. Same with the Flamigo. Getting the same amount of energy on each is going to be difficult. Only does 130. Don't think that it'll be used much. I do think this trap ghost will be interesting. Now we're coming into more of the trainer cards. We got a lot of new ace specs in this set. Amulet of Hope. Draw 3 cards. Search for 3 cards in your deck. If the Pokemon this is attached to gets knocked out, shuffle your deck. That could see some play in niche situations where you really need the combos to win. Not sure it's the best option. Brilliant Blender. This is an interesting card for things like Regidrago. Even things, anything that we're trying to accelerate cards into the discard. Ancient Box, Regidrago, even a Roaring Moon maybe with the dark patches. Could see some play. Will be interesting to see what people come up with that. There's a couple of there's not as much to talk about in the rest of the trainers. I mean, Call Bell is interesting, except it can only be used going second, so it's not really. I mean, it's a worse Luminion basically. Even Serrano searching for 3 Pokemon EX. If you're running just an EX based deck, this could be good. Like Raging Bolt, for example, this could be a good card. But the rest of them don't change that much that you're seeing, right? So Drayton, look at the top 7 cards, get a Pokemon and a trainer card. It's like a Pokegear, but it's a supporter, so you waste your supporter. Don't think it's all that great. Energy Search, this could also be helpful for getting the energy on, but it doesn't add and it doesn't accelerate any onto the Pokemon. It just gets them out of your deck. So I think it's kind of a waste of an ace spec. But who knows? It could see some play depending on the difficulty of getting the different energy types. I've heard a couple of streamers talk about Gravity Mountain being possible to be used, where there are a lot of stage 2 Pokemon that are coming out. There's a lot of stage 2 decks that exist now. The problem is I'm not really sure why they printed this card. I don't think the stage 2 decks are really that powerful where they needed something specifically to nerf them, so I don't think this is going to see that much play. We have an interesting. This card is another interesting one. I think for stall decks like Snorlax, this will be a really interesting tech against Lugia. Pokemon tools and special energy, and being able to discard a stadium. Really useful for Roaring Moon, which is another bad matchup for stall, because Roaring Moon does more damage with the stadium in play. Um, Getting rid of all special energy from Lugia is crippling. Getting rid of a lot of special energy from Terapagos is crippling. Um, I think that we will see Snorlax's switch to use this instead of Hero's Cape. There are just not as many uses for the Cape, I feel like, as this card. But who knows? It only works in specific matchups, so it might be too niche to use in every deck. Again, rolling down the A-Spec train because there are a lot. We've got Miracle Headset. This was similar to what Versus Seeker. Putting 2 supporter cards from discard pile into your hand is good. It's like a better pal pad. That said, you can only use 1 supporter card a turn. Not sure why 2 would be better than 1 per turn, but if you got a perfect setup for next turn, maybe. I don't think that'll see too much play. We got Precious Trolley. Search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon, putting them onto your bench. This could be a really good turn 1 sort of card, even into something like Raging Bolt, right? You set up your entire bench in 1 turn with 1 card. Could see some play. I'm not sure if Prime Catcher is going to get knocked off the high horse for this, but a 1-turn setup for everything in Raging Bolt would make it even stronger than it already is. I know people call it mid bolt, but it's doing well, and I think making it go faster isn't something people want to see. So that's an interesting one. And the Scramble Switch making a comeback. This is very similar to a card that used to exist. Switching your active Pokemon one to your benched and moving the energy to your benched Pokemon. Now, in the current format with the cards that currently exist, I don't think it's that great. That said, with all of these Stellar Terra cards that are coming out, I think that there could see this could be an interesting play, right? We talked about Pikachu earlier. It's hard to get that energy onto Pikachu. If your Pikachu is in the active, it survives a hit from its ability, and you have another one on the bench with no energy. You play this 1 card. Now you have a full health Pikachu that can do 300 damage. It's possible, but again, a lot of those cards discard the energy, so not sure this will see too much play. Could be an interesting, tech for some. Don't think there's too much else to talk about here. I think that this TM is going to be really powerful. Discard all energy from the Pokemon, heal all damage from each of your Terra Pokemon. Again, into a Pikachu, this could be interesting. So let's look at the energy requirements for that Pikachu. See, the problem here is look at the energy requirements. It doesn't work into the deck when you need a water and a psychic. So I feel like it could have been a really good card for Pikachu, but the energies were off. Terra Orb will 100% see use. It's like the Feather Ball that sees some use in other decks. I think this will see use in the Hydreigon deck, just to get those Terra Pokemon that you need. For most cases, Nest Ball still works, like in the Pikachu and some of the cards that are coming out, but I do think Terra Orb will see some play. And then they added Enriching Energy. As long as this card is attached to Pokemon, it provides 1 colorless. When you attach this card from your hand to a Pokemon, draw 4 cards. Now, this, as an A-Spec, I'm not sure it's that great. It is an interesting card when combined with very niche cards like the Pidgeot V. We'll let that load, but the Pidgeot V basically you're allowed to shuffle it and any cards attached to it back into the deck. So you could use it as a draw engine, but that requires getting this card again, and I think that it's a very unreliable draw engine. It could be interesting with pennies. I think that you could cycle in pennies to get draw, but at that point you could have used a different supporter for some draw. Um, Here's the card that I'm talking about. So Pidgeot V, once during your turn, if it's on your bench, you can shuffle it and all attached cards. So you can literally just lay down this card, you use the energy, draw 4 cards, use its ability to put it back in the deck. If you have other interesting draws like a Colress, uh, you could get the energy back with that supporter, and a Nest Ball could get the Pidgeot back. You could get 8 cards in one turn. So I'm not going to rule it out as being used. I just think it is a very, as an A spec, it's difficult. If it was not an A spec, 100% I would see use, but as an A spec, you're getting rid of a lot of other options. Now, obviously, they have a lot of illustration rares, but they do the same thing. So what I really think my highlights here, the A specs, there are a lot of options now, which will be interesting. There are just a lot of options there. I think this Terapagos people aren't really talking about could be a good way to cycle energies onto your cards. Slacking's going to be really strong. I 100% think there will be decks made around this. I mean, even adding this with a Terapagos in the background, they use the same double colorless. I think that'll be a really strong combination. It's a shame the Executor wasn't better. Archaludon, I think, could be good. Hydreigon, I'm really interested to see where this goes. I think this could be a great deck. Unfortunate while in the fighting. Sylveon, I'm really excited to see how this one plays out. I think that this one will be, it'll require a lot more setup and control and interesting things, but I really do think this could change up some things in the meta. Latios 100% will. Pikachu definitely will see play. Magneton will see play. There's a couple of interesting things in the water side here. Ceruledge Edge maybe, and nothing on the grass. So I definitely, to wrap it all up, keep an eye out for these new psychic cards. I mean, Latios and Sylveon, I think definitely will shake some things up. This is in my opinion, it's a great set from them to release for the card game. For collecting, there's a couple of good cards in there, but for the card game itself, I think this is a really interesting set, and it will provide a lot more options, which to an already, in my opinion, healthy meta with a lot of different options that are playable. So I think that's all that I have to add here. Wish me luck at the pre-release. I think that it'll be interesting to see how these cards play out in real life, and I'm excited to play with them on TCG Live, make some decks, especially with this Sylveon there. Thanks for watching. Give me a like and subscribe if you like the content, and have a good day. Bye.